Well, here in the UK, we have a crisis of free speech because the law has become a lot more progressive and therefore a lot more authoritarian in enforcing the various vetoes that now govern our speech, like the heckler's veto, the rioter's veto, and in particular the safe space, poor me, crybaby's feelings veto. Not only that, the law is enforced selectively and politically by police who are less concerned with catching criminals than with telling us what to think.
At the age of 15, I first started researching for this film.
Expressing ourselves and having a right to hear other people express themselves is what makes life extraordinary.
It doesn't matter if you have the freedom to express yourself on a moon when no one's listening. What's important is that people have the ability to communicate.
Well, with me now is the man behind that film, Free Speech, Free Fear, Tarquin Ramsey. He directed and produced it. You're 20 now. You started this five years ago. What made you want to explore free speech?
Well, it actually started off as quite a simple idea. So me and my dad were in Sri Lanka talking to these locals in the most remote area. They had no idea who David Cameron was. They had no idea about these other Western politicians, but they were very, very, very supportive of people like Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So my dad sort of said, well, why don't you make sort of like a montage, like a 10-minute film, asking what is free speech, and then sort of try and sort of put the clips together, the responses together, and then put it on YouTube.
So 5 years later, you produced this.
Yeah.
We in the West like to think that we do have freedom of expression, free speech. What did you find?
Well, when I first started making this film, I really had no idea what free speech was. It's taken us about 5 years to get to where we are now, and from making this film, I cannot stress enough how much free speech is under attack.
In what way?
Surveillance. It's really this idea of being watched. And it's this idea that when you're being watched, you sort of tend to, you kind of sort of like, you censor yourself. So you start to say the things.
But watched by big companies, governments, or everyone? I mean, we're looking at but also multinational, so Facebook and things like that. I mean, at the moment there is this big debate, isn't there, with Apple and with WhatsApp, for example, of encryption. So are you saying it's purely a governmental attack on freedom of speech, as well as big corporate things, because they're selling advertising as
I would definitely say a mixture of both, but it's really this idea of being watched. So it's this idea that when you're being watched, you say you do not say the things you want to say. It's this idea of self-censorship, and I always use this really nice, charming analogy to try and explain this. And for example, when you're in a classroom, which is something we've all experienced, you're sitting there talking to your friends and so on, and you can feel the breath of your teacher standing behind you. Okay. And the presence.
All right, so you think that is in people's minds now. You also, in your film, say that people are sleepwalking perhaps into this very surveillance society. Just talk about the necessity, though, for protecting citizens against, for example, terrorism and that conflict with freedom of speech. You interviewed a former CIA employee, didn't you? Spent 2.5 years in prison for describing torture at secret sites. So how do you make that trade-off?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's the classic example. It's like, should there be a balance between freedom of speech or freedom and security? I personally think that is completely the wrong question we should be asking. I think the question that we should be asking is, would you rather accept the threat of a terrorist attack, or keep the ability to communicate freely?
Right.
The two-tier policing thing then that Priti Patel was just discussing there, what does the Prime Minister say about it, if anything?
So pretty soon after the Cobra meeting, the Prime Minister gave a short briefing to political journalists where he said that he absolutely does not accept the claim that there is two-tier policing. He says that the police will always carry out their job without fear or favour, and he totally rejects that characterisation. So he has made it very clear that that is something that is not on his radar. It is, though, on lots of people towards the right's radar, including Nigel Farage, who has said that that should be the main issue that Keir Starmer addresses. But we can see there that also Priti Patel distancing herself from those comments as well.
Okay, and this is basically, I mean, just in case anybody isn't clear what we mean by two-tier policing, it's the suggestion that effectively white working class people get a tougher deal than people who might turn up for a Black Lives Matter protest or indeed a pro-Palestinian march.
Absolutely, and that's something that lots of people who believe this have been citing. They've been citing the pro-Palestine marches and Black Lives Matter, and they have said that those on those marches, when on occasion they have turned violent, they have not suffered the full force of the law. They've said that the police have been very gentle and avoidant in that type of violence, but that in this situation and these riots in particular, that's not what's happening with the police. So that's a claim there, alluding to the fact that the police potentially have some kind of favouritism over the two.
My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth, and the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so.
Unlike the United States and most other countries, we in Britain have an uncodified constitution, which means many fundamental rules are often customs, precedents, and a variety of other legal instruments. In other words, it is unwritten, nothing is concrete, and critics say it can sometimes be a mess.
Free speech is far from free. Commonly known as civil discourse or the open exchange of ideas, freedom of speech comes at the cost of valuing the right to express one's opinions without the fear of censorship or restraint. With the evolution of the digital age, freedom of speech becomes more controversial as new means of communication and restrictions arise. Freedom of speech is a cherished idea around much of the world, considered to be a basic human right that millions have fought and died for. But now we may be in danger of losing it. And this right isn't being taken away by an oppressive external enemy, but by an electronic generation who value political correctness and subjectivity over freedom of speech. In institutions across the globe, words are being banned. Here is a list of banned words on actual college campuses. Universities are now coming out with speech guides to create an atmosphere where no one can be offended and all words and phrases are politically correct. Ironically, the term politically correct is on there too. Some words and phrases have been banned completely, while many more words have been labeled problematic. Freedom of expression, even more so than speech, is a fundamental human right that reinforces all other human rights. However, free speech does not mean giving bigots a free pass. It includes the right and moral imperative to challenge, oppose, and protest bigoted views. And as history has shown, bad ideas are most often defeated by good ideas, backed up by ethics and reason, rather than by bans and censorship. A free society depends on exchanging new ideas, regardless of their potential capability of offending someone. Many of the most important, profound ideas in human history, such as those of Galileo Galilei and Charles Darwin, caused great religious offense in their time. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment alone were turbulent periods of upending our traditional perspectives of religion, including our place in the universe. Astronomer Nicholas Copernicus faced fierce resistance from the Catholic authority when he discovered the Earth revolves around the sun. Without that open exchange of ideas, our current understanding of the world would be unrecognizable and entirely false. Everything we know about the world, from the age of our species to the laws that govern energy, has come into being first by free speech, nurtured by the innovation of ideas, and curated into our collective knowledge if deemed worthwhile after withstanding the test of time. But free speech or hate speech should never come at the expense of human life. While we are constantly haunted by the memory of violence and its potential, we must not be fearful slaves to safe spaces. Great ideas can never thrive in a vacuum. Freedom of speech is what both makes up and defines our social contract, enabling people of radically different opinions to live together without violence, usually. Words matter. Some words hurt. But we know this about free speech. Discourse is all we ever truly have control of. So let's never be afraid to talk about Well, anything.